The Crusades and the expansion of Western influence in the Mediterranean. Introduction: the Crusades as a catalyst for change. The Crusades, beginning in the late 11th century and spanning several centuries, were pivotal in shaping the political, economic, and cultural landscape of the Mediterranean. While the primary goal of the Crusades was the conquest and control of Jerusalem and other holy sites in the Holy Land, they also had profound and lasting effects on Western influence in the Mediterranean region. The Crusades facilitated the growth of European power, the expansion of trade, and the dissemination of ideas, all of which significantly altered the dynamics of the Mediterranean world. Chapter 1: The Crusades and the expansion of European territory. The creation of Crusader states. The First Crusade, 1096 to 1099, resulted in the establishment of several Crusader states in the Levant, which became the first significant foothold for Western powers in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Kingdom of Jerusalem. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, the most significant of the Crusader states, was founded in 1099. The Crusaders controlled Jerusalem and surrounding areas for nearly 2 centuries, establishing a Christian stronghold in a region dominated by Muslims. Other Crusader states. In addition to the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Crusaders established the County of Edessa, the Principality of Antioch, and the County of Tripoli, each of which provided valuable territorial gains and helped establish European political and military power in the Mediterranean. These states served as bases for further crusades and facilitated the flow of resources, people, and ideas between the East and West. Crusader strongholds in the Mediterranean. The Crusades also saw the establishment of Crusader-controlled islands and ports in the Mediterranean. These territories were crucial for maintaining control over trade routes and for staging further military campaigns. Cyprus and Rhodes. After the fall of Jerusalem, Crusaders established strongholds in Cyprus and later in Rhodes. These islands served as vital logistical hubs for Crusader forces, and Cyprus became the base of operations for the later Crusades. The Crusaders' control over these islands increased their influence in the Eastern Mediterranean. Venetian and Genoese influence. Italian city-states, particularly Venice and Genoa, played crucial roles in the Crusades by providing naval support. Venice, in particular, benefited greatly from its involvement in the Crusades, gaining control over key ports and trade routes in the Mediterranean, including parts of the Byzantine Empire's former territories. Chapter 2: The economic and commercial expansion of the West. Trade routes and commercial growth. The Crusades dramatically expanded trade between the East and West. European Crusaders, particularly from Italian city-states, began to dominate trade routes in the Mediterranean, bringing goods, ideas, and technologies from the Islamic world to Europe. The growth of Italian maritime powers. Venetian, Genoese, and Pisan merchants became key players in the Mediterranean economy, benefiting from the Crusades by controlling ports, facilitating trade, and establishing colonies. Venetian merchants, for example, established a monopoly on trade routes between the East and West, bringing luxury goods such as spices, silks, and perfumes into European markets. Economic networks and cultural exchange. The Crusades opened up new economic networks across the Mediterranean. Crusaders brought back knowledge of Eastern products, luxury goods, and technologies. This facilitated the exchange of cultural and intellectual ideas, as well as the spread of Islamic scientific, philosophical, and mathematical knowledge to the West. Access to Eastern markets. The Crusaders' control over parts of the Levant, including key trading cities like Antioch, Acre, and Tyre, opened the West to Eastern goods and markets. While the Crusader states themselves were economically dependent on trade with Muslim and Byzantine merchants, they also acted as intermediaries between Christian Europe and the Islamic world. Chapter 3: The Crusades and the Spread of Christian Ideals. Religious influence and cultural exchange. The Crusades had a lasting religious and cultural impact on the Mediterranean, helping to establish Western Christian ideals in the region and spreading European influence. The spread of Christianity. While the primary goal of the Crusades was to secure Christian holy sites, they also sought to spread Christianity to the Eastern Mediterranean. In regions like the Holy Land and Byzantium, Latin Christianity was imposed on local populations, sometimes with violent consequences. The The Crusades led to the establishment of Latin Christian communities in the East and strengthened the Christian presence in Mediterranean territories. The Fourth Crusade and the fall of Constantinople, 1204. The Fourth Crusade, 1202 to 1204, diverted from its original goal and led to the sacking of Constantinople, a pivotal event that deepened the division between the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches. Despite the fall of Constantinople, Western influence in the region grew, as Crusaders and Catholic forces expanded their power in Byzantine territories and established Catholic rulers. Latinization of Eastern Christianity. The Crusades contributed to the Latinization of the Eastern Christian world, especially after the Fourth Crusade. Latin Christianity began to dominate the religious landscape of Crusader-controlled territories. Papal authority in the Levant. The Crusades solidified the papal authority over the Latin Christian territories in the Holy Land. Latin Christianity was promoted over Eastern Orthodox Christianity, and many Orthodox Christians in the Levant were forced to accept Latin rites and authority. This division deepened the schism between the Eastern and Western churches, a divide that persists in many ways to this day. Cultural influence. Western art, architecture, and intellectual traditions began to influence the Eastern Mediterranean as a result of the Crusades. Crusaders brought European ideas and Gothic architectural styles, influencing the cultural development of regions under Crusader control. This exchange of culture helped to shape the European Renaissance, as knowledge from the Islamic world, preserved by scholars in the Crusader states, was transmitted back to Europe. Chapter 4. The Crusades and the Shift in Mediterranean Power Dynamics. The decline of Byzantine power and the rise of Western influence. The Crusades led to a shift in the balance of power in the Mediterranean. The weakening of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of Western European states contributed to the decline of the Byzantine and Muslim powers in the region. The fall of the Byzantine Empire. The Fourth Crusade, 1202 to 1204, devastated Byzantine power in the region. The sacking of Constantinople, followed by the establishment of the Latin Empire, greatly diminished Byzantine influence in the Eastern Mediterranean. Although the Byzantines eventually reclaimed Constantinople in 1261, their empire was significantly weakened, opening the way for Western European powers to exert more control in the region. Western dominance in the Mediterranean. Following the Crusades, Venice, Genoa, and other Italian city-states became dominant maritime powers in the Mediterranean. The Crusades provided them with control over key ports and trade routes, which helped shift the balance of economic and military power toward the West. The Italian city-states would continue to play a significant role in Mediterranean affairs throughout the medieval period. The rise of the Ottoman Empire. The decline of the Crusader states and the weakening of Byzantium paved the way for the rise of the Ottoman Empire in the 14th and 15th centuries. The Ottomans, who were Muslims, began to challenge Western Christian powers in the Mediterranean. They eventually captured Constantinople in 1453, marking the end of the Byzantine Empire and the final shift of Mediterranean dominance to the Islamic world. Chapter 5. The long-term legacy of the Crusades on Mediterranean relations. Lasting cultural and economic impacts. The Crusades were not just a religious and military movement. They had lasting cultural, economic, and political impacts on the Mediterranean. These effects shaped the development of Europe, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean region for centuries to come. Economic integration. The Crusades helped to integrate the Mediterranean economy, linking European markets with those of the Islamic world. European merchants were able to acquire luxury goods such as spices, textiles, and scientific knowledge from the East, contributing to the growth of European markets and the development of global trade. Cultural exchange. The Crusades facilitated cultural exchanges between the West and the Islamic world. Many of the scientific, medical, and philosophical texts preserved by Islamic scholars were translated into Latin and spread throughout Europe. This intellectual exchange contributed to the European Renaissance and had lasting effects on the development of Western thought. Tensions and reconciliation. Although the Crusades deepened religious and cultural divides, they also laid the groundwork for future dialogues and exchanges between the Christian and Muslim worlds. Despite the violence and hostility, the Crusades also facilitated some cooperation, particularly in trade and knowledge, which contributed to the eventual blending of cultures in the Mediterranean. Conclusion: the Crusades as a turning point in Mediterranean history. The Crusades were a defining period in the history of the Mediterranean, with far-reaching effects on political, economic, and cultural dynamics. While the Crusader states were ultimately unsuccessful in establishing permanent Christian rule in the Holy Land, their influence extended far beyond the military failures. The Crusades marked the beginning of a new era of Western dominance in the Mediterranean, with lasting consequences for trade, culture, and geopolitics. The exchanges between East and West during this period helped to shape the modern Mediterranean world, leaving an enduring legacy that continues to be felt in both the West and the Islamic world today.